Hi, welcome to ECPG Live Recovery Services and Supports. Before I introduce our guest to you, first let me just remind you that you can visit our blog, and already it has some resources on this topic listed for you. And if any additional resources come up in our discussion, we will add those as well. So you can check it out now, you can check it out afterward, and we'll get it updated. Feel free to say in the chat where you're tuning in from if you'd like, and that is also how you can interact with us today. So you can put in the chat any questions, comments, and Rob is behind the scenes filtering through all of the comments coming in from Facebook and YouTube. And so you may see your comment slide across the bottom of the screen there where you see my name and our blog going across. So with that, let's welcome our guest today on this subject. We have Joshua Wallace. He is the CEO and president of Peer Washington. We've also got Mark Lefkowitz. He is a certified gambling counselor. He's tuning in from Prescott, Arizona. He's got a career in this field and is a problem gambling consultant. And we have joining us Tiffany Turner. She is the operations manager for a recovery cafe in Seattle at their South Lake Union location. So welcome everyone. You're here. And get us started first, if you would. Tell us all about your organization. I think we've got a little feedback there. We'll see if we can check our settings and maybe correct that. But tell us a little bit about your organizations real quick, because not everybody knows what the difference is between a recovery cafe, peer support, recovery coaches, 12-step programs. Tiffany, do you want to get us started there?
I am from the Recovery South Lake Union, and we are recovery support, a refuge of hope and healing for people struggling with post-traumatic stress, homelessness, sometimes just life. So we offer recovery circles. We have 12-step meetings on site, meditation classes, all kinds of things just to help people keep going through their recovery journey.
What's a recovery circle?
So a recovery circle is a processing group, and it is led by a member facilitator, a staff, or a volunteer in the community, and we just share about our days, our times past. We like to stay focused on the future and in the now, but we can go back into the past and try to heal some of their hurt. But recovery circles are just processing groups to help people walk through their journey, help them process what they're going through.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Is there any food or coffee that happens at recovery cafes?
So when you are a member of the Recovery Cafe, and there are people that just come for the food, and that's fine, because they do start to get involved once they're there enough. We try to have great food. We have a coffee bar. We have food. We serve lunch and dinner while we were in service, but currently we have to-go meals. For individuals that are struggling, they can just go to the cafe and pick up a to-go meal, and it provides 2 meals, so a lunch and a dinner.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's awesome. And Josh, tell us a little bit about Peer Washington.
Sure. So I'll start by saying I identify as a person who's thriving in long-term recovery from co-occurring challenges. I think it's important to say because that really is the premise of our work. Peer Washington is the umbrella organization for a number of growing direct service sites around Washington. We provide peer-led, peer emotional support and development services. And I say peer-led, it's important to know that our board and our staff are all people with lived experience. And the key piece around peer work that's so important is that you be able to sit next to someone that not just has empathy for you, but understands firsthand, having gone through the same struggles that you have, so that you can skip over trying to quantify and qualify how you feel today and moving forward with how are you today and how we move forward and how can I see in you something that you have not seen yourself. 4 core services that we provide at all of our service sites is one-to-one peer coaching, which is intended to be for 6 months to establish a good foundation for what recovery look like for you, what are the definition, what are the services that you need. We provide peer emotional support groups, which happen topically. They're led by people around a lived experience. It can only be attended by a person with a lived experience. So this can be something direct, like talking about substance abuse or mental health issues. It can be about adult survivors of childhood incest. It can also be about socialization. So it can be game nights or book clubs or other ways for people to come together and enjoy recovery, which is the one thing we always leave out. And then we provide supported employment and supportive housing. We want people to come through our doors and be able to be greeted by somebody who understands them and help them move up to whatever the best life that they can be, however they define it, is sort of how we look at it.
That's awesome. Thank you. And Mark, go ahead and tell us about your organization, and then we've got some questions coming in for you all as well, and so then we'll get to those.
Well, I'm my own organization. I'm mostly a consultant. I've been in the field for almost 40 years. Been working in the field probably for 30. And I'm a recovering gambler. For me, it's over 37 years since I made my last bet. Longtime member of 12-step programs, very involved in those programs. But also I'm an internationally certified gambling counselor. I'm a sponsor. I'm a recovery coach. I work a lot with with casinos, but mostly work with helping companies develop gambling treatment tracks. I was very fortunate to work with a great company up in Washington. I worked a little with Free by the Sea and great people. I miss living up in Washington. And I'm chairman of the National Recovery Committee through the National Council on Problem Gambling. And we're very unique. The people that treat gamblers and work with gamblers tend to be very unique, that most of them are not in recovery from gambling, as opposed to maybe in substance abuse, where we find a lot more people in recovery that are the providers. So it's always been my job. I'm a teacher. I've trained a lot of therapists, international speaker, but I always believe, it's my mission to make sure that everybody knows, what about us? It's the gambler who we're all working, it's those with a gambling problem or those affected individuals that are our mission, and that we need to always think, what do they want, and what are their needs?
Right, absolutely. And thank you all for the really good work that you do as well. I know it served a whole lot of people. So Rob, we've got, let's see, a question from Maureen. Perfect. Member, does it cost anything? How do you become a member? I think this one's for Tiffany about being a member of a recovery cafe.
Same.
So to become a member at the Recovery Cafe, all you have to do is attend a new member introduction day at 1, and then we have one on Saturdays at 1 as well. Everything is free. You just have to do the introduction, learn about the guiding principles, and you're good to go.
Awesome. Awesome.
And for us, membership for us is, we don't require any kind of intake, but we do an intake for folks for certain things, but once a member, always a member, and never a cost for services. We never want to ask people questions that we think are sort of humiliating. How much do you make? Where do you live? That sort of thing. So we just invite people in.
Yeah, and for me, I try and make sure that, first of all, I'm a member of 12-step group. It's all free, and there's a lot of free resources. And then there's also a lot of state-funded treatment for gambling that I could help. A lot of times I'll help my clients find some kind of state-funded treatment where that can be free also.
Right. And since you've mentioned that, for anybody tuning in Washington State, there's a state problem gambling helpline you can call 24/7, call or text, and they can help find a treatment provider near you in the state of Washington, anywhere. And for those that may be tuning in from another state, there's also the national helpline as well that can be called, and as well as other states have their own state helpline. So there's a lot of ways to call depending on where you're at, which state you're in, to find help, both for treatment counselors and for other services like the recovery support services that we're talking about today. Thanks. And so the roles of the different people working in these positions, peer counselors, recovery coaches, 12-step sponsors, that gets a little bit fuzzy for a lot of people. So would you guys mind kind of saying what these roles are, what they do that's a little bit unique to some of these other roles? Josh, do you want to maybe start off about peer counselors for us?
Sure. Actually, I love to go over all three because I think this is an important conversation. So CPCs are professional peers who have been trained and are attached to a behavioral health organization in Washington. And they are people with experience, and they work as a part of a team with the behavioral health team to help individuals achieve their treatment goals. They are Medicaid, so it is tied to a treatment goal, and it's very specific to the service that they're receiving internally. Versus a recovery coach, which if we typically use the CCAR model, which is the Connecticut Community Addiction Recovery. And under their model, it's specific to substance use disorder and can be anybody with or without lived experience. Or I think for a lot of us that have programs, we define a little bit differently, but for us in peer coaching, that same training and expand other experiences. And then sponsors, in a recovery coach model, you will allow a person to put together things that are important for them, including what their recovery path is. A sponsor is specific to the recovery path of a 12-step method. It's a part of that long-known program. And so while a recovery coach would be non-directive, a sponsor is directive. It helps to walk you through the steps of the program to help you achieve sobriety in that way. So those are the differences between the three as I see them. I can't hear you.
Yeah, you're not coming in.
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Just like a Zoom meeting. I feel, it's our life these days. All right. Well, let's, Tiffany, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? And then we'll address some of the questions and comments coming in on these roles.
So I think that Joshua stated it so well that I can't even add anything. I would just say that all of the recovery coach, the peer, and the sponsor is just someone that's going to walk beside you with your journey. Try to make it easier, give you some pinpoint insight, and most of the time they're going to give you that insight on experience. So that's all I have to add.
Yeah, and yeah, I had all my notes written down, and Josh had every one of my notes. It's just the one thing I wanted to say was very interesting. I took my recovery coaching certification up in Washington, and the first thing they told me is they're not sponsors and they're not counselors. And I'm saying, I'm a counselor and a sponsor. What am I going to do? It's a very tough discipline for me.
So many beautiful things you can be, and we know that.
Yes. And you know what? As human beings, our life is all kind of enmeshed together anyway, is who we are as people. So we're complex and we've got complex needs. Maureen had asked, are there peers for family members with lived experience from that perspective? And then kind of a companion to this, if we can pull over Tabitha's comment. Thanks for tuning in, Tabitha. She says, I wanted to become a peer for family of gambling addiction, and I was engaged to a gambler, and I'm involved already with the Lane Prevention Center, but I want to help the spouses of the gamblers and they need more help. Absolutely. Thank you for doing that, Tabitha.
I'd love to.
They need more help as well. Go for it.
So our different sites have charters for the specific disparately impacted communities that they serve. And so I think families of those impacted by behavioral health, addiction, mental health, any of that are probably the most underserved and under-recognized. Peer Kent has a focus on families of, and so does Peer Spokane for those areas. But what I think is important, not only that we be able to provide space for them and have space for them, and to acknowledge to you today that yes, they do exist, but to make sure that when we do provide training and service and work opportunity for them to engage, that what they're doing is supporting other family members of those impacted by behavioral health, and never to put a family member of, like a mother who's lost a child to opiate addiction is not somebody you want to have working with a person who's dealing with opiate addiction. I see that happen a lot of times, and I just think it's important for people to understand where the peer connection happens.
Right. And Tiffany, I saw you nodding your head to that. Did you have some thoughts on that as well, providing for the families?
Well, I just feel like families need the most support because sometimes it's just something that they can't comprehend or understand. And it's just really hard to have your life affected like that and you don't even know what's going on. So I just think that it's good to have some support for the families, and I think the families should reach out to get some support because it's definitely hard.
Right. If a family member walked into something like a recovery cafe or something, is there any information they could get that might steer them in a direction that's helpful to what they're going through?
So the Recovery Cafe always gets calls, and they always have walk-ins of people that are in very, very dire need of some kind of support for their families. And that's a big thing, but we're our only recovery support, and most of these people need treatment. So we can offer them a space and new member introduction and bring them in. But with recovery, the person that needs the services has to be the one to take that step. So we always tell families that in the beginning, we always offer information and the resources that we do have for them to take the next step. But many families and people that call us for services are really in need of some type of treatment. And we're on the recovery support tab. So we have resources at the Recovery Cafe, and we also we can give them a little time and help them navigate and tell them how to navigate things. And then we'll hold space, like I said, at a new member introduction if recovery support is a fit for that person.
Right.
Yeah. Families of problem gamblers tend to have much more needs than almost any other addiction because of the financial devastation. So families come in and they're wiped out, and in many cases, they need treatment, whether or not, or some kind of support, whether or not the gambler is stopping or not. So they usually need that immediate help right away. Excuse me. Gambling has a very high correlation with domestic violence, and there's so many factors. There is a program from a 12-step perspective. There is Gam-Anon, which is like Al-Anon for families of gamblers. I know there are some Gam-Anon meetings in the state of Washington and throughout the country. They have a great website if you want to put that on, GAM-ANON.org. Great bunch of people. And again, sometimes, most of those state services that we talked about before will see the family member, without seeing the gambler. So the gambler doesn't have to come into treatment for a family member to access those same free services that are available to gambling. But it usually needs to happen, and they are, but all the comments, they tend to be underserved. A lot of treatment centers have family weekend, and they tend to be pretty devastating of finding out all that. When you tell a family that the money's gone, the house is being repossessed, your kid's not going to private school anymore. There are just so many factors where that family needs that immediate support, and especially also when the gambler is going into treatment, and then the family's left to pick up all the pieces.
Right. And while we're on it real quick, and we'll get to Maureen's question here as well, we have links to GA and Gam-Anon in the blog for this post. If anybody wants an easy way to find those, they can just go to the blog, scroll to the bottom, links right there. But of course, as is the problem in many rural areas, sometimes there just aren't meetings near you. And one thing that COVID has done is get a lot of these meetings online. And so if you go to the GA or Gam-Anon websites, then you can look for where there might be some phone or virtual meetings going on right now that you can tune into. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to mention now that, you know, the meetings officially from Gamblers Anonymous and Gam-Anon are very limited. But here's probably the greatest resource that I'll give you, the best thing I can tell you. There's a website called gamblersinrecovery.com. And this one you have to put up. And gamblersinrecovery.com has all the Zoom meetings throughout the world where you could just click a link. There's also a link for family members. So you, in the middle of the night, you can be in a meeting in Australia and Scotland. There's probably 100 meetings a day on Zoom that could be accessed in gamblersinrecovery.com. And there's also a link for family members.
Excellent. Thank you.
I want to add to that, there's a resource. We're actually, because of COVID, we're building in the background on the platform of Hey Peers, so we can have meetings that will reach rural areas or places, people that are not able to travel to our sites. But Support Group Central and the Hey Peers app both have a number of meetings worldwide. So, you know, if there isn't one exactly like what you want, you could probably start on there. So I'd go to supportgroupcentral.com or download the Hey Peers app and look at what they've got. And if you check back on our website in another, I think it was 6 months or so to get developed, you'll see opportunities either for those to exist or to build your own.
Excellent. And the link to your website is also one of the resources listed on our blog as well. So I've made some notes of a few other things we'll add after our episode, and a lot of the things we've mentioned are already linked there that people can find right now. And Maureen asks, is there specific training for family members, or do they take the same peer recovery coach trainings? That's a good question. If someone wants to become a peer counselor for family, same training, different training?
Well, they can certainly take the same training. I think it works great. I'm also working with some folks from McLean Hospital, which is a Harvard psychiatric hospital, who developed a family support training module, and I'm trying to get it brought here to Washington. So I think there are a couple of different options that are on the way. But I certainly, when I look at the CCAR training, I don't see any reason why you couldn't fit it to any type of peer experience. It really is, the training is about taking an experience of traveling a journey together with the folks that you're in the training with, and coming out the other end with a way of understanding how to approach someone without pushing your own values upon them.
Right. Right. It's about sharing your experience, what works for you, and working with that person to figure out their own journey and what they need to do that fits their situation. Yeah. Yeah. So what, I think we might have had some technical issues for a minute there. I don't know if that was on my end or was that on everybody's. Might have just been on mine. Okay. So what would be your advice to someone seeking recovery from gambling? Mark, let's start with you. What would you say?
A couple of things. First thing I would do is I'd go in your state and find out if you have a state council or a government entity, and most states do. I think 37 states do. Find out what the resources is. Find out what the state helpline number is. Call the helpline. They're incredibly good at triaging every possible resource. Again, you might want to go to Gambler, which again, I'm sure your thing is on. There's either gamblersanonymous.org or gamanon.org. Or again, I mean, I hate to tirelessly plug this. It's a very unique, because of the COVID, it's a very unique opportunity for people to get immediate help in these really massive, in these great Zoom meetings. What's great about these Zoom meetings are there's a lot of people with a lot of time. I've traveled all over the country going to 12-step meetings, and it's hit or miss. Like I go into a room and the person running the meeting's got like 3 months clean, and they got the most time, and so there's not as much recovery. But on these On the Zoom meetings, there's tremendous recovery. People really take, because nobody's got, it's a great opportunity. People are taking advantage of also being able to help new members navigate through it. They get a lot of it. I always say the new members are like soap operas on these Zoom meetings because everybody really cares daily about their lives. So there are a lot of ways to access resources. And again, it's both for, and I'll say it right, those with gambling problems and for those affected individuals.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Josh, do you have some other good advice for people that are seeking recovery, don't necessarily know where to start or find some help?
I think Marcus gives really great tips. If you're in an area where a peer or recovery cafe is, I would definitely recommend that you contact them or even look for one of the local AA offices and see what kind of groups they might have. And just, internet searches are good. I think that, ultimately you need to get connected with a group of people who are in recovery from gambling, right? And so finding the resources that are around you and available to you are going to be the most important. If you live in rural areas or are unable to travel, I think looking for those online connections is going to be extremely important. If you're able to get connected to one of our sites or our recovery cafe, and we don't have the site, the service, we can probably help you start it or get you connected to it. We have resource connectors. So the thing that I try to really instill in people is to don't let the fear hold you back. You need to get out there and ask questions so that you can get connected to the services that you need rather than sit back and think that nothing is out there for you, because it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Tiffany, do you have some other advice to add there?
Yes. So just like the guy said, resources. Look for your resources. Find the ones that are going to fit your needs. The Recovery Cafe currently has a lot of gambling resources now, more than we've ever had. And if anyone is in need of those, you can access us. You can contact the Recovery Cafe and leave a message, and someone will call you back. And then you can email and someone will call you. We have our resource specialist working all the time, so she will give you a call back, and someone can work with them one-on-one to find resources for them.
Right.
Yeah. Could I was looking at the comments, and there is one about I just had it, then it just moved. Do we need independent recovery? Oh, they keep moving. Do we need independent recovery support programs for a family member in recovery? I'm hoping you do, because the families need a lot of attention. And for what I understood about being a coach, they have so many more resources. A Gam-Anon person is going to just be specific and maybe take the person through the steps and be able to relate. But somebody really needs that personal attention to be open-minded and meet the client where it's at. So I would hope that there is some really extensive training for family support members that act as certified recovery coaches that can do it right and be way more independent than being stuck with the rules of counseling or the rules of 12-step.
Right. And while we're kind of on that subject of training, Rob, if you want to pull in that one of suicide prevention training, Maureen asked, do peer and recovery coaches take suicide prevention training, or how do you support that? And to me, that's a really important thing, because this is an issue not only for the people in recovery, but also for the loved ones affected by it as well. Are you guys able to speak to that at all, if they get some training on that piece of it?
So I would say that it probably touches a little on this when you're speaking to people, when you're going with boundaries and things. But number one, if a peer or recovery coach is dealing with someone that's suicidal or things like that, we have to take it seriously. We're not supposed to really touch on that. We're supposed to help and support and give them the information that they need, 911 and things like that. But the training that we go over in peer and recovery coaches is very minimal. If you're working for an organization, they will give you that training. You get that training within your organization and someone you're working for. But if you ever fall into that you need to contact the right people. 911, suicide hotline, crisis network. There's also now a Washington Listens, and that is on the Recovery Cafe website. So that is a line that someone can call, not necessarily in crisis, but just need to talk, and they're lonely and they're dealing with things, and they just might need to share. But if you get into a situation where someone's in that serious of a need, please contact the right people.
Yeah, I can send you a link too. We're part of the Washington Listens team across Washington, and we've got a video that explains that. But for our coaches, we provide them with assist training. We provide them any kind of training we can to possibly help them, but I think assist is important. We do mental health first aid training. We bring in trauma-informed care. All these things are important, but I think specifically when we're talking about suicide, there's two big things that people don't realize. One, that suicidal ideation is normal, and so how do you differentiate between ideation and a real danger? Because you can potentially scare someone away who needs to receive services. But the other part is that if people are scared to ask direct questions of people who may be contemplating suicide, and that is the question that they ask. And I think these trainings are a really great way to do that and to get people into the process of doing it so that we're not so afraid to be able to engage before it's too late to engage.
Right.
And gambling has one of the highest rates of suicide of any addiction. So we always have to really worry about and make sure we cross the I's and dots the T's and do what we need to do.
Yeah. Hey, Jerry, thank you for tuning in. And yeah, he points out Celebrate Recovery is a nationwide for all addictions. And another good one is Smart Recovery as well. These two are pretty flexible in who they can appeal to. They've got a good online presence and things. So there are more support services out there that people can definitely look into as well. And I'll touch on a couple of the things we haven't brought up are the apps. For a while there, I had like 3 different gambling recovery apps on my phone just to check them out and explore it. And I wanted to really know what they do. I eventually had to uninstall them because they were all telling me how great I was doing in my recovery from gambling, right? But it was very encouraging. People can track things, get resources to several of the resources we've even mentioned through some of these apps, as well as words of encouragement. And there's even some that have some mindfulness meditation things that they can play and listen to get through stressful times or cravings and things like that. So the apps are also, there's a lot out there for that people can access as well. And Maureen mentions that ASIST is a great training, and that is for suicide prevention as well. And one thing I guess I can make a plug for real quick is one thing that ECPG is doing right now is making a training specifically for peer and recovery coaches, and it's an introduction to problem gambling. So it builds on the training they've already had to get their certificates and doing what they do, and just says, and here's what you need to know about problem gambling should you encounter someone that either is dealing with that as their primary or in conjunction with or family member of or all of it, so that you know, oh, I've already got the tools. I just need to know some extra stuff and then how to apply it to that as well, so that they can be a little versatile in their work and feel confident they know what they're doing. So that's coming. We're working on getting all of our trainings virtual. So stay tuned for that because those things are coming soon. Yeah. And let's see, are there any other comments we want to pull in? Tabitha says, I've never seen a addiction so by the book. That's the truth. Pick up any gambling book and that is exactly what it's like to live with a gambler. Wow. Well, thank you for your wisdom and sharing your experience, Tabitha. We really appreciate it. You've really contributed a lot to this conversation today as well. And then Maureen asks, how do you help increase awareness for general public that recovery is a lifelong effort and not stigmatized?
You know, for me, it has been a lifelong effort. I got first clean when I was 24 years old. I was 65. So a lot of background. Can you hear me? Because I hear like the train going by.
It's a little fuzzy, but we can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it's been a lifetime of me being in recovery, and for me, and thank God it has, because the way I understand it from a personal level is there are things in the last 37 years that to know, not because of my fault, where things went on where it could have set me back to gambling, but maintaining for me those connections in 12-step. I'm not saying the actual word because I can't break anonymity at the level of press, radios, films, and television, the internet. So you know what I'm talking about when I say 12-step for problem gambling. And, I try and tell people when they first come in, for me, it's and I'm very aware, and I became even more aware before about language and what we're doing with language. I know Lori Rugel, who's in our business, has put together some really great stuff of changing language and removing the stigma from it.
Mm-hmm.
I have no problem because I'm old school. I call myself a compulsive gambler, but I always say, when I'm sharing or I'm speaking to a group of people, I always say, that's one of my truths, but that's not who I am. So I don't identify myself as a compulsive gambler, but it certainly is one of my truths. And I think we do need to make it softer, not to label people as addicts, and to use better terminology to get more people to stick around forever. And that to me is what recovery has been for me personally, and it's worked real well. I always feel comfortable through this without being stigmatized.
That's good to hear. Yeah. I always tell people,
And I think
no, go ahead, Josh.
I think this is such a passion for me, or gambling across all addictions and mental health. It's just the way that we stigmatize it, beat people down, and particularly with gambling and addiction, we think of them as moral failings, just like a choice that you've done. And I think that even those of us who have dealt with addiction, the compulsion that happens with us internally because of the chemical release that happens in our brain makes it difficult for us to understand why we can't stop. And so at some point we end up accepting responsibility for that addiction as some way to understand what we're going through, what we're doing. And so by the time we get into recovery, it's so difficult. And I think at a time right now when we're really looking at systemic racism in this country and what are you really doing to move against it, it's not so much about that you're not making judgment, but are you pushing against the judgment. I think the same thing needs to happen here. I think people with lived experience like myself need to be loud and proud about it as much as we can, and I recognize that I have a lot of privilege that allows me to do that, but it changes. And I think it's also important that we push back against the people who are trained to be invalidating towards folks who have addiction and mental health issues, because we learn that from the time that we're young. So by the time that we're living in it, whether it's impacted us or not, we're forcing it upon everyone else and ourselves.
Yeah. And one thing I like to say is, awareness about problem gambling is about where it was for alcohol 50 years ago. I was talking to a group online, of course, the other day, and I said, well, raise your hand if at some point in school or somewhere else in your life you learned that a predisposition for alcohol use disorder can be passed down. If it runs in your family, you can inherit. Everybody raise their hand. I said, and raise your hand if you learned the same thing was true about gambling. Nobody. Right? Nobody had ever learned that. And it's just the awareness just isn't there for the public. And so there is more stigma about it, and shame, and well, I'm not ingesting something, therefore it's different. Well, it's doing the same thing in the brain. So yeah.
But I think we've made some tremendous strides, especially the work that the Advocacy Council does, and with a lot of public awareness. And with all the states legalizing gambling, they're putting aside money for marketing, your 800 number, and everything else. So we're getting better.
Yeah. Yes. Let's see. And we'll take a couple last comments here. Marine Post, what advocacy efforts are most important now? Any important legislation coming up in states or nationally?
Well, I'll just go briefly. After the last recessions, a lot of states amped up their gambling and allowed more legalized gambling. And, from what we've been talking about in the community is that might be happening now, that there might be states that were maybe on the fence of sports betting. Now they'll be over the fence because they'll need to make up money for the money that they've lost during the pandemic. So I think it's our job is to advocate to make, which we do, and I'm sure Evergreen does, is to advocate that, hey, if you're going to expand the gambling, you're going to have to put more money into the state's treasury for addressing problem gambling issues.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then Jerry posts, I've been in recovery by the grace of God for 37 years. Bravo. Thank you much for sharing. And I say before sharing that I have a desire not to gamble today, as no longer am a compulsive gambler. Awesome. Excellent. Very cool, Jerry. Thank you for sharing. We need more people jumping on the bandwagon of stepping out and stepping forward and saying, it's not a stigma. It's just normal people with this problem is very, very common. Can easily happen. And let's see. So to wrap us up here, I've got a whole list of resources. We're going to add all of most of what we've talked about so far is already on the blog, and we've got some more that we're going to add to it. And the comments and questions that we haven't had a chance to get to, and some are kind of specifically to ECPG, we'll follow up on that. And we're going to give those to our guest experts at the end so that if they think of some things, tomorrow or whatever, and they're like, oh, doggone it, I wish I'd said that or added that, they can add that in. It'll all be posted on our blog as an ECPG extra. So you get to add some more information on that and answer the things we missed, expand on things you might think of that you wanted to add later. So everybody tuning in, keep an eye out for that, the ECPG extra on this episode. And anything else you guys want to throw out there before we all say goodbye for the beginning of our weekend?
So I just want to call out that the Recovery Cafe is offering to-go lunches every day of the week. So Monday through Friday, 12:30 to 2:30. Saturday, 12:30 to 2:30. And Sunday, 10:30 to 12:30. It's open to the public. You don't have to be a member. We are giving out enough food for lunch and dinner. And if you're in need of some support, we offer telecommunication. We know that people are lonely right now. There's high rates of relapse and things like that. Please reach out. Recovery Cafe is recovery support, and that's what we're there for. We are working hard behind the scenes to help people get through this pandemic and just life situation. So please go to our website.
That's amazing. Tiffany, is that something that's unique to your location, or the other? Is that something kind of a lot of the recovery cafes are doing right now?
So many of the recovery cafes that are in the network are offering telecommunication, and they're open in some ways to give support to their communities. At least half the time, they, just like we have reduced hours and things like that, they're still out trying to support their communities as much as possible during their pandemic and still stay safe.
Awesome.
Here we're actually maxed out on our coaches. We're going to find out how we train more without making the mill. I want to address really quickly, there's a question for me here on how to advocate. So without knowing where you live or where you're from, I don't know if it's Washington or elsewhere, but if I could say nothing else is get in touch with your legislative representatives and talk to them about the importance of this. You are their constituent. What you think matters, what your experience is matters. And what they want to fund is what's called Recovery Support Services, which is what the cafes and my organization does. And those can include supported employment, supported housing, but really the community of support, the reality that we have to live every minute of every day of our life with these challenges means that you cannot continue to address them in a focused scope of inpatient or a single office visit. We have to fund community gatherings of support. So talk to your representatives and let them know that this is important. Recovery Support Services needs to be funded.
Yeah.
Amen, Josh. Amen.
Absolutely. And I'll just also add real quick, I meant to mention this earlier. I'm not sure what the other states are doing, but in Washington state, the state program is also providing in various ways services to help therapists and counselors get set up in telemental health as well, for those that maybe weren't previously set up with that before the virus. So There's a lot more of that now than there was before, which hopefully makes it more accessible to people that may have some barriers to receiving that. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Again, check out our blog on this. We will post the blog website in the chat, so you can just click on it, because all of these resources are either already are or will be shortly listed on that for you. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and have a great weekend.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.